What's going on, everybody? Man, a couple hours ago, I wasn't sure we were going to be doing this. I spent the last couple hours on the couch, kind of half awake, half asleep. It's that time of year when people get strange illnesses that just happen upon them. And I have not been feeling well the last couple of days, been kind of woozy. And I spent about an hour and a half recording a podcast interview early this afternoon. And then I was just out for a while. So, but here we are. I had it scheduled, and this is really the only night this week that I um, was going to be able to do this. So we're going to try and get through as much as we can, but I can't guarantee we're going to get all the way to the end. I don't know what it is. If I'm sick, if there's something just wrong, or what it is. But I know at one point I dozed off on the couch long enough to wake up with sleep paralysis, and that's never a good feeling when that happens. Um, so can we elect Grant a third time? Well, unfortunately, the way we're doing this is that we're just voting on the two main party nominees, or if there's a third main party nominee, then we'll vote for him. So Grant did not win the Republican nomination in 1880, so there wouldn't really be an opportunity to elect him a third time based on that. So what we will do is I will put a poll in the chat, and you guys will have a couple minutes to vote and to make your case for your candidate. And we'll go through. And basically, this is just an opportunity for number one for us to kind of vote on how we want them to go. Um, but it's a chance to just talk briefly about each of these elections, about what was going on, about what the main issues were, about how close or not close those elections were, things like that. So we are on to 1868. If you didn't see the first live stream, we got through the 64 election between Lincoln and McClellan. We haven't had a ton of elections that have gone a different way, but there were some who have gone a different way. I expect most of these next uh, 10 or so elections are probably going to go pretty much the way they did historically, but we'll see. In the meantime, let me go ahead and pull up the screen here so you guys can see. We can take a look. I've got the Wikipedia page pulled up. It's just the easiest place to access a lot of the information. And oh yeah, I've got my Orkney Brewery shirt on today. And speaking of which, before we get into this, and I'm going to be making another video about this soon, but I do have a number of group tours that are currently available for booking, including a couple that are going to wrap up before too long. In the excuse me, in the description of this live stream today, you'll see links to two of them. One of them is for Jordan, which is in February of this year, so that's coming up in like 3 months. That's going to be an amazing trip. We've got 5 spots currently available for that tour, and it's not that expensive. You have to pay for your flights to get there, but then pretty much everything else is covered once you arrive in Jordan. So you can click on the link, you can read all about it, look at the itinerary, see where all we're going to go, and check that out if you want. And then we have a very small tour. There's only going to be 12 of us, and we're going to be doing a hiking tour of Hadrian's Wall in northern England. And we're basically going to be hiking about 60 miles of Hadrian's Wall. And then what they'll do is they'll pick us up and drop us off every day. So, like, they'll drop us off in the morning at our starting point. They'll pick us up at the ending point, take us to a hotel, Airbnb, or like a bed and breakfast. And we'll stay there. We'll get up in the morning and do it again. And we'll see a lot of the really cool sites on Hadrian's Wall. And camera is something from 2005 at the moment, you're saying? Well, I mean, the camera's very small at the moment, so I'm not entirely sure what's that's interesting. You can't see my handsome face. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. Everything All right, I think we're good now. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I may need to reset my router or something because I've got really, really fast internet, and we were having trouble earlier today when I was filming my podcast interview that I was a part of. And it took a little while before it stabilized, and it seems to be the case again today. So apologies for that. And I did since we had that issue there, that did remind me that I did not go in and do a couple of the settings that I normally do for our live stream. So I'm going to go in and do that now. There we go. I usually set it to where people have to be a subscriber and set slow chat to like 30 seconds. That way nobody spams the chat. Um, and LOL 55, yes, YouTube does run ads, and I think it runs them randomly. So some people get ads at times that other people just don't not getting ads, and vice versa. So unfortunately, Rowan Gamer, you're specifically one of the reasons that I remembered I needed to turn on slow mode because you put the same thing like 5 times in a row. So yes, I'm keeping on slow mode. All right, so as I was saying, we have another tour that we're doing. We're hiking Hadrian's Wall, and there's only 12 of us for that one, and there are 6 spots currently available for that one. But that one, even though it's not till late April, I have to cut off bookings for that right before Christmas. It's about a week before Christmas, so there's only about another month to be able to book that one. But I'll be making some more videos about that, and we're going to be announcing soon a second Scotland trip for next summer. That's going to have a slightly different itinerary than the first one because we had so many people who wanted to book the Scotland trip that we decided to add a second one. Lou Elizabeth from the Scottish Highlands, very cool. I wish I was there right now. Big fan of the Highlands, been there a couple times. So, all right, I'll get to some of the super chats in just a minute, but let's go ahead and start by talking about the 1868 election. First post Civil War election. It was assumed that it was Grant's nomination for the Republicans if he wanted it. The Democrats would have likely nominated him if he wanted that as well. So Grant was always going to be the nominee for the Republicans. He was certainly their first choice. Andrew Johnson is the incumbent. He was Lincoln's running mate, but he was a Democrat, so he tried to get the Democratic nomination. Was never really going to be considered for the Democratic nomination. He was impeached earlier that year, but there was some question about who would get the nomination. And so I want to talk real quick about who some of the people were that were going for this nomination for the Democrats. Kind of the front runner going in is George Pendleton, who's a former congressman from Ohio. He had been McClellan's running mate in 1964. You see him featured prominently in the movie Lincoln. He's one of the main Democrats opposing the amendment to abolish slavery. He's also the grandson of Nathaniel Pendleton, who was Alexander Hamilton's second in his duel with Aaron Burr. Pendleton will eventually become a U.S. Senator from Ohio. And we will talk later about the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Bill, which was named after him. So did some good things. Civil service reform, huge, important piece of legislation that Pendleton is responsible for. Yes, this whole idea that you can't trust Wikipedia when it comes to things like history is really overblown. This stuff is all really well documented, and it's been kind of, we're long past the era of people just going in and just randomly editing historical articles about Wikipedia to make it say things that aren't true. So, just scroll down to the bottom with any of this stuff, and you can see all of the sources for this information. It's a good kind of collecting point. It's a good starting point. I'm not saying use Wikipedia to write your historical papers and books, but yes, it's totally fine to use Wikipedia. So So Pendleton is not able to get the nomination. So it ends up going, and you can see here Winfield Scott Hancock, who's going to be the 1880 Democratic nominee, is running. Andrew Johnson was running. Thomas Hendricks from Indiana, who's going to be the vice president later on. And you have Horatio Seymour, who's the governor of New York. New York is still at this point the largest state in the union, has the most electoral votes, and his vice presidential nominee is going to be Frank Blair, who had been a high-ranking general under Grant. So you have Frank Blair, whose father was one of the founders of the Republican Party, the Blairs were conservative Republicans. And by this point in 68, the radical Republicans, the more liberal Republicans, have largely dominated the party. And so a lot of the conservative Republicans have bounced back over to the Democrats at this point. So it ends up being Grant and Schuyler Colfax, who is the Speaker of the House, along with Horatio Seymour, the Democratic governor of New York, and Frank Blair, who is his running mate. And so you can see historically, the popular vote was actually pretty close. It's 52.5% to 47%. Not that big of a blowout, but 214 to 80 in the Electoral College. So let me go ahead and I got to go back into, because I have to do this kind of a weird way. Here we go. I'll go ahead and create the poll. And go. And while you guys are voting, I'll get to some of our super chats. So Jacob, thank you for becoming a member. I really appreciate that. Appreciate that support. Czar Nicky II, long live the House of Jefferson, he says. Well, you won't get my support on that, but hey, to each his own. Ryan, thank you for that. I'm a Brit, but always viewed Nixon as a guy who could have been fantastic. Also, one-off starters presidents. Just let him down. Let himself down. Yeah, Nixon, super intelligent guy, really had a strong handle on the issues. Watch a lot of his interviews after his presidency. Really just understood the world really well. He just was his own worst enemy. See how the vote's going. Oh, yeah. 94%. Poor Horatio Seymour. Never had a chance in this one. Enver, hello again from Bosnia. If you do come to Sarajevo, I absolutely want to come to Sarajevo. Be sure to take a walk down Wilson's Lane. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff named after Wilson in the former Austria, Hungary, in the Balkans, and in that part of the world. I thought I did a song on McClellan merely failing to win. Did I not? I'll have to go back and look, but I'm sure I did that song. By the way, a whole album out about Gettysburg from Songs of History that you can check out. It's not on the YouTube channel, but you can find it on any of your streaming services like Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, things like that. I'm looking now to see if I have the McClellan song on here. I'm sure I did one. I just maybe I never played it for you guys. All right, I think we can probably go ahead and close this particular vote. I did. Okay, Daniel says I did. It's on one of the other channels. So I think it's on. Let's see if I uploaded that one to Songs of History. Oh yeah, it's totally there. 7 months ago, man. Where you been? That song's been up for 7 months. It's got 3,100 views. I'll even post the link for you. Give me 1 second. There you go. All right. 93% for Grant. Never really much of a vote on that one. That was always going to go that way. So let's go ahead and move on to 1872. This time it's it's Grant against Horace Greeley, who barely lived past the election. He died not long after the election, which would have made things very interesting. And he runs as a liberal Republican. But he was allied with the Democrats, which was a really strange situation. Horace Greeley is like a newspaper guy, also from New York. But this election ends up even more one-sided than the previous one. In fact, you see that in theory, anyway, the electoral votes are 0 for Greeley. You see that Hendricks got some votes. So this was kind of a really strange situation with this one. The liberal Republicans and the Democrats allied together. You've got Henry Wilson as the vice president this time around. He's the U.S. Senator from Massachusetts. Look at that neck beard. Yes, look at that neck beard indeed. There you go. Benjamin Gratz Brown for vice president, governor of Missouri. Interesting. Just like the previous ticket that ran against Grant, you had a vice presidential candidate from Missouri, only that was Frank Blair. A lot of the more conservative Republicans tended to come from Missouri. Some of the other candidates that were running there, you had Lyman Trumbull from Illinois, Charles Francis Adams, who is the son of John Quincy Adams, who was running, Andrew Curtin, who was the former governor of Pennsylvania. He had been governor of Pennsylvania during the Civil War. Salmon Chase, who had been governor of Ohio, who was Lincoln's Secretary of the Treasury and then appointed Chief Justice. He had also run for the Democratic nomination in 1968. Chase was one of those guys that was just obsessed with becoming president of the United States. Twice he runs for president while Chief Justice of the United States. So while that wasn't unheard of, it's still pretty uncommon in the grand history of things. You said Charles was John Quincy's grandson. Okay, he's John. That's Charles. No, he's John Adams' grandson. He's John Quincy Adams' son. Yeah, I was right. So it's John Adams. His son's John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams' son is Charles Francis Adams. He had been, I think he was Lincoln's ambassador to the UK. Oh, yeah, envoy to the United Kingdom. Yeah, there you go. So, all right. So let's go ahead and vote on this one. I don't think there's a whole lot else to say. By this point, Reconstruction is kind of, a lot of people have turned against the idea of Reconstruction. There's a lot of corruption going on in the Grant administration, but you don't really have a solid coalition opposing Grant in this election. So let's do some more super chats while we're at it. I would love to see you do a past presidential debate reaction. That would be interesting. I could see myself doing something like that down the road sometime if we need some ideas for streams or just a reaction video. Adventurous Gold, thank you for becoming a member. Wilson coming for the Wi-Fi because he knows what's coming. Yes, absolutely true. And I love your profile picture of Joe Biden eating ice cream. Good stuff. Jeremiah, thank you. Howdy from Gettysburg. Awesome. So are you in Gettysburg? Do you live there or are you just there for the Remembrance Day ceremonies? I really wanted to be there for Remembrance Day this year. Just couldn't make it happen. Jackson, thank you. You saw Nuremberg. Rami Malek and Russell Crowe were phenomenal. I've been hearing that. I've heard nothing but good things about that movie so far. It isn't showing at any of my local theaters, so I haven't been able to see it yet. I'm going to have to probably wait until it comes out on streaming, maybe another month or so, but I definitely want to see it. I've been watching all the clips, and I loved the previous movies that we've had about Nuremberg. So I'll be very anxious to see it when it does come out. Marstar Miller, thank you. I am doing well. I hope you are as well. A happy Thanksgiving. Very cool. Thank you for that. All right, I think we can probably end this vote. This is another one of those ones that probably was never going to be in doubt. Yep. 88% for Grant. All right, now it's going to get interesting. This next one I think is going to be very interesting. You watched Death by Lightning. It was better than you said. So I don't know how it could be too much better than I said, because I loved it and I thought it was great. I should have worn my Death by Lightning shirt. So this was kind of cool. I got to meet, I was at a screening for the first episode of Death by Lightning the night before it came out on Netflix. And I got to meet President Garfield's great-great-grandson, Tim Garfield. I got to meet the guy who actually created the show. He was the showrunner, the main writer of the show, and got to talk to him some. Got to meet the author of Destiny of the Republic, Candice Millard. So that was just a really great opportunity. But then the next day, I got a message from the guy who created the show. And he said, "Oh, man, I totally just didn't recognize you last night. But he said, I saw your breakdown of the trailer, and a bunch of us who worked on the show saw your breakdown of the trailer, and we loved it, and we were sharing it around with people." I just thought that was really cool, because you never know who's watching. I had no idea that the people who made Death by Lightning would see my breakdown of the trailer and love it. But then another one of the producers reached out to me and asked if he could send me some stuff, like a poster from the show and a couple of t-shirts that had Garfield's face with like sunglasses on, and Death by Lightning from their premiere that they did in New York. So that was really, really cool. I was grateful for that. What I'm going to do, David, is I'm actually going to do some videos where I look at some of the moments in the series that are portrayed and talk about what they get right and what maybe they changed for the sake of the narrative, and talk about the real history and the real event as it unfolded. So I'll definitely be doing that. All right, let's go ahead and move to 1876. This one's going to be interesting. So this is the very controversial election of 1876. This is the Democrats' first real opportunity to win. And there's a lot of things going on here, right? This is the tail end of Reconstruction. Reconstruction has become a very unpopular issue in both North and South at this time. You're starting to see a lot of voter suppression. So a lot of the freedmen, as they were known, these are formerly enslaved black men who have been given the right to vote by the Constitution. A lot of places that's being suppressed, and violence and threats and different laws are being used to keep them from voting. So while everybody likes to kind of talk about this election because of what happened with the commission and Rutherford Hayes, and how Hayes agreeing to end Reconstruction got those controversial electoral votes for his side, it's a lot deeper than that, because there's also a lot of suppression of Republican votes going on in the South that could have turned some of those races. Because if you look at 1872, if you look at the South, it's solidly Republican, with the exception of Texas, Tennessee. And then look at what happens in 76, where a lot more of those states go for the Democrats. It's not just as simple as sometimes it gets made to sound. And it's also important to note that Hayes, while he did agree to pull the troops out and end Reconstruction, Tilden would have ended Reconstruction too. The only difference was that Tilden openly ran on ending Reconstruction. That was the Democrats' platform. In fact, the Democrats have been running since the Civil War by saying that they're the party of the white people and that the Republicans are the N-word party. I mean, that's how a lot of the Democrats are spinning this at this time. So I honestly believe if it had been a fair election across the board, where there's no deals, there's no suppression, there's no nothing going on, Hayes probably wins more comfortably than he does. But you guys are welcome to vote for who you want to. You've got William Wheeler is the vice president for Hayes. Hayes is the governor of Ohio at this time. Wheeler is a New York congressman. New York is always important for both sides, Democrats and Republicans. They want New York, and you're going to see New York is going to play a huge part in every one of these elections in the Gilded Age going forward. You also look at some of the other players that you're going to see here. You're going to see some prominent people that you're going to see moving forward. James Blaine, the senator from Maine. You got Roscoe Conkling, senator from New York. Oliver Morton's another guy from Indiana that you're going to see. Elihu Washburn from Illinois, who is an ally of Ulysses S. Grant. And Hamilton Fish from New York. So Hayes ends up getting the nomination. This is going to be one in a string of former Civil War officers from the state of Ohio running as the Republican nominee. Took 7 ballots before Hayes got it. You can see here that Blaine goes in the heavy favorite. And Blaine's going to go into a couple of these as a heavy favorite moving forward. Oliver Morton goes in with the second most votes. Hayes ends up kind of being a compromise candidate, much like what's going to happen in 1880 with Garfield. Samuel Tilden, governor of New York, from 75 to 76, is running with Hendricks, who's the governor of Indiana. And you can see, again, Winfield Scott Hancock is a nominee. A lot of these guys are going to keep getting recycled until they work their way up to the top. So let's go ahead and get the vote going on this one. This one will be interesting to see how it comes out. I think it's going to be close. All right, here we go. Patrick says, I was waiting to vote Grant in. Hopefully I can assure Wilson never becomes POTUS in Earth. VTH. I like that. Rob, awesome. Looking forward to this. Preston, keep up the great videos. Love the CK. I want to play some more CK3. That's one of my favorite games to play. If he didn't know he were going to die in 2 months, I'd go with Greeley. If I didn't know he were going to die in 2 months, I'd go with Greeley. I'd have been a half-breed. We'll talk more about half-breeds in the next election for sure here. Kyle, thank you for that. Soviet Union. I can vote for anyone who can undermine American power and destroy it. Interesting. Who's the best and worst president from each party, in your opinion? Ooh, that's an interesting question. Best Republican, Teddy Roosevelt. Worst Republican. Oh, that's more interesting. Keeping with my rule of not voting on anyone from the last 20 years, which rules out any of the modern people from either party. Worst Republican. Wow. Maybe Harding. Yeah, I'd probably go with Harding, which is tough as an Ohioan, but he was actually pretty popular at his time. Worst Democrat, that one's easy. James Buchanan. Best Democrat. Let's see. Best Democrat. Yeah, I guess it probably does have to be FDR. Yeah, I'd go with FDR. I don't agree with everything FDR did, but all right, let's see how this one came out. Rutherford Hayes wins with 73% of the vote. I did not expect it to be that close, or to be not close. I thought it would be a lot closer than that. I didn't think it would go 73-27 like that. Interesting. See, Mathis, I feel like, people saying that Kennedy was the best Democrat. I feel like there's a tendency in history for us um, to over romanticize people who die in the middle of doing whatever the thing is that we rank them on. So a general like Stonewall Jackson, who dies in the middle of the Civil War, I think gets much rated much higher as a Civil War general than he might have otherwise because he died right after one of his greatest triumphs. I think Kennedy gets mythologized. I'm not saying he wasn't a good president. He definitely was. But I think he gets ranked higher than he might have otherwise because he died at the height of his popularity. He died when he was young. Had he run for and been elected to a second term and had to deal with the quagmire that Vietnam was becoming and a lot of other issues, and knowing that most presidents tend to lose favorability in their second term, I feel like had he lived out two full terms, he might not be remembered as fondly as he is. And again, that's not to say that I don't think Kennedy was a very good president, because I do think he was. I think he handled some things really, really well at a very tender time in American history. So, all right. So we are on to 1880. Don't let me down in this one, people. I'm going to let my bias show in this one. Listen, I love me some Winfield Scott Hancock. Hancock, the superb, great general. But there's no way in the world that this election should have been as close as it was, except that Garfield was just kind of an unknown quantity. So I've talked a lot already in videos about James Garfield, so I'm not going to go into that one too much. But as we know, if you studied this at all, you go into the Republican nomination process really with three main candidates. And that's Grant, who after 4 years away from the White House is running full on for a third term. You have Senator Blaine, who went into the last election cycle as the favorite but couldn't get the nomination. You have John Sherman, who is the Secretary of the Treasury, former senator from Ohio, younger brother of William Tecumseh Sherman. And none of them can get the votes. It's really Grant and Blaine are the main two. Sherman's kind of a second tier candidate, and Garfield comes out of nowhere to win the nomination. The problem here's the thing, and listen, I love Grant. Grant is one of my favorite Americans in history. I love Ulysses S. Grant, but I'm absolutely thrilled that he did not win the nomination in 1880 because he was totally in the pocket of Roscoe Conkling at that point. And Grant winning that election would have only happened because a lot of people got promised a lot of things by Conkling and his political machine in New York, and it would have meant the continuation of the spoils system, and we wouldn't have gotten some badly needed civil service reform that needed to take place. Roscoe Conkling, his political machine needed to die, and it would not have happened if Grant had gotten that election. And I say that as somebody who absolutely loves Ulysses S. Grant. So, ironically, James Garfield died on a Monday. So take that for what it's worth. So Garfield gets the nomination, and the longest ever Republican nomination process to give him the nomination. They put Roscoe Conkling's kind of right-hand man, lackey, Chester Arthur, the former collector of the Port of New York, who had been ousted from that position by Rutherford B. Hayes, in as vice president. It's one of several times in American history where somebody was thrown onto the ticket for balance and for solidifying the party, who nobody wanted anyone near the presidency, at least nobody at the top of the ticket. Another example is when Lincoln was elected in 1964, when McKinley was elected in 1900. So Winfield Scott Hancock and Congressman William English of Indiana are the nominees for the Democrats. And this is a calculated move by the Democrats because a lot of what had sold the Americans, especially in the North, on voting for the Republicans was what they called waving the bloody shirt. It was reminding people that the Democratic Party was the party of secession. They were the ones who caused the Civil War, is the way it is sold to the American public. It's hard to pin secession and Civil War and slavery on a hero of the American Civil War for the Union, like Winfield Scott Hancock. So that's what gives the Democratic Party a chance in this election. And it did make it a very close election. As you can see, the popular vote was separated by 2,000 votes. In other words, if 1,000 people that voted for Garfield had voted for Hancock, he would have won at least the popular vote. And you really only needed like New York to switch. If New York flips, now Hancock has 190 electoral votes and he wins the election. So it was really like one state could have made the difference in this one. So let's go ahead and put this one up. All right. Adam Ryan, thank you for that. Isaac, just put the final touches on my trip following Easy Company in Europe, knocking off your bucket list. Very cool. You're gonna be blown away by some of those sites. Like going to Breakcore Manor is really cool. The Crossroads in the Netherlands is really, really amazing because it looks identical to Band of Brothers. When you go to Band of Brothers and you see the Crossroads site, it looks just like it does on the show. Going to the town of Foix, I know they pronounce it Foy on the show, but it's Foix, is really cool outside of Bastogne. And Bastogne itself is a cool little town to visit. Jeremiah, thank you for that. Oh, you've lived in Gettysburg for 7+ years. Awesome. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Adam, yes, definitely going to be doing some Death by Lightning content coming up soon. Adam, gonna react to Historia Civilis' Iroquois. Ooh, I like that idea a lot. I definitely would like to do some more Native American stuff. I'm going to take a picture of that comment so I remember that. Discovery, thank you for that. Doing a tour of all the existing presidential libraries and have meetups at each one. I mean, that would be a years-long process because they're all over the country. But I've been looking to do some meetups at some sites here in the States. So that's actually a really cool idea for how to do it. I have made it a personal goal to visit the grave sites of all the presidents, and I'm at like 20 so far. I got a long way to go. But I'd like to get there. Oh boy, Adventurous Gold. Shout out to our first LGBT president, DJT. Not on your bingo card because I'm telling you right now, listen, I'm not trying to downplay this Epstein Files stuff, but listen, while it's important that all the information is made available to the public, I don't think we should hide anything. Please, can we please keep in mind that many of these things are just emails that Epstein, who was a known liar and a known criminal, said, whether it's about Trump or Clinton or anyone else. Can we not equate Epstein wrote an email with it being factual? I'm not saying it couldn't be factual, but just because the dude said something in emails does not make them automatically true. So let's just keep grounded a little bit with all this stuff. And remember that we're not talking about clear evidence of crimes. We're talking about what a person said, a person that we all agree was a major scumbag of a human being. And I say that no matter who he's talking about, whether it's somebody on the left or somebody on the right. All right, let's take a look at the vote. All right, James Garfield with 88%. I have a Garfield bobblehead, and I don't know what I did with it. I got it at the Garfield presidential at his home when I was there with Matt Beat. Okay, so obviously the way we're doing this is based on the actual candidates in each election. And obviously, based on how things go in our timeline, things might change, right? So, if somebody else gets elected in each of these elections, then the person running in the next election might be different. We're not dealing with any of that stuff. Chester Arthur did want to get the nomination for the Republicans in 1884, but it really was not something that was going to happen, and he wouldn't have survived his term had he won. Chester Arthur, while he was president, was already dying. He was dying of Bright's disease, which was a pretty common kidney ailment of that era. My great-great-grandfather died of Bright's disease in 1911. And Arthur, he was in his 50s. He was only a couple years older than me when he died. This was James Blaine, 1884. And his vice presidential nominee is one of my all-time favorite Civil War generals, John A. Logan, the best. Logan and Garfield were the best political generals in the Union Army in the American Civil War. Those two, but Logan especially. I think Logan's got to top the list of political generals for me. So John Logan had been a Democrat before the war. I did a podcast episode on stories of the Civil War on Logan. He's a Democrat, but he becomes a Republican at the time of the Civil War. He's a U.S. Senator from Illinois at this point. Very popular. He is one of the main reasons why Memorial Day becomes a national holiday. And James Blaine from the state of Maine, who had been Garfield's Secretary of State, and was a strong ally of Garfield, becomes the presidential nominee. Once Roscoe Conkling was out of the way, once Garfield dispatched Conkling as a political rival, it was all Blaine for that next election. And so it's a pretty strong ticket. It really is a good ticket. But the momentum had been building for the Democrats to win an election. It was only a matter of time. There had been 20 years of Republican domination. It was only a matter of time, especially with the changing demographics that were happening. And so for the Democrats, you're going to have, let's go ahead and scroll all the way down here. I guess we are actually already past them. You're going to have governor, again, New York. Notice how New York plays a part in every one of these elections, either as a presidential nominee, a vice presidential nominee, or as an important power broker in determining who the nominees would be. New York is a big player in all this. And so is Indiana. So here's Thomas Hendricks again, who had been the nominee previously, and is now once again the Democratic nominee for vice president. We'll go ahead and put this one up. Cleveland, I think, is a solid president. First term, probably better than his second term, and that's true for a lot of presidents. Blaine, I like Blaine, and it was a super close election. You can see it's only about 60,000 vote difference in the electoral or in the popular vote, and honestly, again, could have come down to just a handful of states. New York decided that election just like it did other ones, or Indiana and Missouri combined could have made a difference. But let's go ahead and pull this one up for a vote. I just screwed something up here. I'm just bear with me, guys. You can see my brain's a little foggy at moments, and I'm kind of talking slow and I'm typing slow. I'm not feeling 100% at the moment. All right, here we go. And James Blaine, if you've seen Death by Lightning, another prominent character in Death by Lightning, played by Bradley Whitford. All right, let's go ahead and do some more super chats. Best candidate in history. I mean, where do you even start with a question like that? I mean, you could talk about who's the best candidate to never win. You could say someone like Henry Clay in that situation. Blaine, is a pretty solid one for the 19th century as well. Gosh, I'm trying to think of who else. But I guess if you want to say best candidate, there's no better candidate than the one who doesn't really have any opposition. So you could say someone like James Madison. Best Republican Lincoln, worst Donald Trump, Democrat best FDR, worst Joe Biden. Interesting. So yeah, you're showing a little bit of recency bias with your worsts there. Joe and Amy in the Philippines love the channel. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Did Garfield also like lasagna? I don't know if he did. I do not think Conklin was a bad person. I will say this, Adam, and you make a fair point there. If you've seen the portrayal of Roscoe Conkling in Death by Lightning, him and Chester Arthur both, I think they get caricaturized a little bit. It's kind of a caricature character, if you understand what I mean. But sometimes you have to do that as a plot device. Because in order to understand and for people watching a story unfolding on TV, you sometimes have to exaggerate characteristics of a candidate or of a person in order to help people understand the difference between two people who maybe had a lot more in common than they really are portrayed as. So I do agree that Roscoe Conkling probably comes across a little unfairly in that regard in Death by Lightning as a bit of a caricature of who he was. Was he running a corrupt political machine? Absolutely. Was he a strong champion for civil rights? Yes, he was. I mean, there's a lot of redeeming qualities that Roscoe Conkling had, but he was also definitely somebody who was kind of promoting a cronyism in politics that needed to go. But I think he definitely was more nuanced and more gray than black and white, like a lot of people in history. All right, let's go ahead and end this one. All right, our first close one that we've had 53-47. That's our first close election and also our first change from what happened historically, where James Blaine wins narrowly. And he may be benefiting a little bit from some carryover from what happened with everybody being focused right now on Death by Lightning and that story. But all right, let's go ahead and move on to 1888. So James Blaine becomes the exception to an otherwise pretty ironclad rule for the latter half of the 19th century, which is that in order to win the Republican, or in order to win the White House as a Republican, you have to be a Civil War veteran from Ohio. And Blaine was neither of those things. So now, speaking of Civil War veterans from Ohio, here is General Benjamin Harrison, who obviously you can see here it says home state Indiana. Harrison was a senator from Indiana, but we claim him here in Ohio because he was born and raised in Western Ohio. But yeah, this one will be interesting. There's Levi Morton, who is U.S. ambassador to France. And I want to talk about him for just a second because once again, we're talking about a New Yorker, right? So especially when you have somebody who's from the Midwest as a Republican, you really need that New York support. And so every single time, as I've been saying, New York is going to be a big player in these elections. So Levi Morton is U.S. ambassador to France. He's a congressman from New York. He later serves as governor of New York, lives to be nearly 100 years old, and actually also portrayed in Death by Lightning. You see the scene, kind of a fictionalized one, where Morton is nominated to be the Secretary of the Navy by Garfield. And Morton gets dragged in with a hood over his head and threatened by Roscoe Conkling and Chester Arthur, and he turns down the nomination. And they kind of show Levi Morton as this really weak, vacillating figure. So Grover Cleveland, again, where's he from? New York. New York. It's all about New York and Ohio at this time for the most part. And he's running with Alan Thurman. Alan Thurman is from, just wait for it, Ohio. Yeah. So you have the Republican ticket, you have Ohio born Harrison with New Yorker Morton. The Democratic ticket, you have New Yorker Grover Cleveland with Ohio's Alan Thurman. He's the president pro tem of the Senate for a while. He's a U.S. senator from Ohio. He is chief justice of the Ohio Supreme Court for a while. And he's a congressman from Ohio. He's had a long career in politics. Alan Thurman's not somebody you hear much about, but major, major figure in Ohio politics for a long, long time. Let's go ahead and pull this one up for a vote. Right about the time this election is going down, you have the Jack the Ripper murders happening over in England. Let's go ahead and do some more super chats. Zededits, yes. Thank you so much for being a member. Yes, Wise Guys Productions. I am very close to finalizing my 2026 schedule. Hard to believe I have to plan this far in advance now, but I do because I've got a lot of things going on. I'm going to be filming more for the History Channel in January. I've got group trips coming in February, April, July, August, September. So I'm working on figuring out where, but we're definitely going to do some like 1 and 2 day tours at Civil War battlefields and some meetups along with that. So Cutting Room Floor. Yes, I watched the first episode. Fantastic. Exactly what I would expect from Ken Burns. Got to interview Ken Burns a couple of years ago. That was a lot of fun. So, getting to meet him a few times over the last few years has been an awesome experience. He's one of the reasons why I'm into history in the first place. His Civil War documentary was like a formative moment in my history journey that caused me to fall in love with learning about the Civil War. Adne, what election so far do I think might be swayed by hindsight? Adams is probably judged by what we know now, not as a candidate from 1796. Yeah, that's fair. I think 1912. 1912 is probably one of the elections most likely to be swayed by hindsight, based on what we know now about the candidates. I wouldn't say, Malik, that Wellington is the most overrated general. I would definitely agree that Wellington is overrated. Wellington's definitely overrated because of one victory against Napoleon that he really only won because of a lot of help and a timely arrival of a Prussian army. He was losing to Napoleon before the Prussians arrived. Blaine, James G. Blaine, continental liar from the state of Maine. Yes, there you go. All right, one more, and then we'll look at the results. Wes spent 2 months researching all the presidents and found a newfound liking for Truman. Why do you think he hasn't talked about more? I think part of it was Truman himself. He was kind of an understated guy, much like Coolidge more so, who just, didn't, I don't think, toot his own horn a whole lot. He also comes in after 12 years of FDR. So, and coming to the presidency as a vice president who becomes president because the president died, and then winning one term in a very unlikely victory in 1948, and then being sandwiched between FDR and Ike. I think those are all reasons why that I think he just gets overshadowed by even larger than life figures that were president before and after him. All right, let's go ahead and see. I haven't been following the results. Let's see how this one went. Oh, we've got another close one, but the Republican dominance of our elections continues. Harrison wins 53-47. So that is actually, while Grover Cleveland won the popular vote in that election, because Harrison won New York, which of course was a big deal. Grover Cleveland couldn't win his home state. But that played a big part in why, even though the popular vote went the way it did, the electoral vote went in favor of Harrison. So that brings us to 1892, where we're going to have ourselves a three-way race. And, one of those unique situations, much like what we almost had in 2024, where we could have had, we didn't have the same two people running 3 times in a row like we did then. But you have a former president running against the sitting president who defeated him 4 years earlier. And so there's all of that at play. And here's a really interesting name that you have in this one, Adlai Stevenson. And Adlai Stevenson's a name you're going to see pop up again with later generations, one of his descendants during the mid 1900s. But you've got Adlai Stevenson from Illinois as his running mate. So again, New York and Midwest balancing the ticket. You've got Whitelaw Reid running with Benjamin Harrison. He's a politician, a diplomat, and a newspaper editor. Whitelaw Reid is from Ohio. And why is that allowed? Because normally you actually not only have both of them from Ohio in Harrison and Reid. Harrison's, again, from Indiana. So that's what makes it okay, because you can't have two people on the ticket from the same state. You have to find a way around that. And so Harrison's really from Indiana, even though he was born in Ohio. But Whitelaw Reid's from the same part of Ohio as Benjamin Harrison. So it wasn't a great ticket for Harrison. It wasn't the best choice for him for a vice presidential running mate. And you see that it's a much more one-sided ticket, where you see Wisconsin and Illinois and Indiana and New York all going to the Democrats in that election. Harrison really had very little chance of winning. So people are saying, who's James Weaver? He's from Iowa. He's a congressman who ran for president twice. He had been, I think, a Republican until around 76. Then he becomes a greenback candidate, as you can see, and then a populist. And then he becomes a Democrat late in life. So he's one of those guys who just kind of goes with the flow a little bit, so to speak. So let's go ahead and pull all three of these up here. And I'm going to give you guys the heads up now. We're not going to get, unfortunately, too much further in this. I'm starting to feel a little worse for the wear as this goes along. So I almost canceled the whole stream tonight. But we're going to go as long as I can here for a little while longer. I can't even spell Harrison right now. There we go. Yeah, Steven. I don't know. I've got something going on. I spent most of the afternoon on the couch, half asleep, just not feeling particularly well. All right. I think it's safe to say I wish we had more facial hair presidents. Well, I mean, not saying one way or the other that he should be elected, but you might get that. I mean, I think there's a pretty good chance that J.D. Vance is the Republican nominee in 2028, and he's got a beard. So the last Ohio president, or the last president to have facial hair, was from Ohio. So maybe Ohio brings it back. I think McClellan should have never lost a battle. McClellan should. He has never lost a battle. Yeah, he did. He got his butt kicked a number of times. Greetings from the Netherlands. Who's the best Chief Justice in U.S. history, in my opinion? Listen, that's really honestly a question more for Matt Beat than me. Supreme Court is not a strong suit for me in terms of my knowledge, to where I honestly don't even I don't feel comfortable giving an opinion on that. I'm sure some people in the chat can say. Some people said Earl Warren. We'll say Taft because he's cool. JD says bring back presidential beards. Spoken like a man who can grow a beard, JD. I would grow a beard if I could, that's for sure. Earl Warren. A lot of people saying Earl Warren. John Marshall, certainly probably the most powerful of Chief Justices. Zism, thank you for that. Sulla, we got some Romans in the chat. How do you respond to the argument that Lincoln never cared about ending slavery, that he only did it when he was forced to? Neither of those things are true. Lincoln absolutely cared about ending slavery. And I think if Lincoln felt he had the power to unilaterally end slavery, he would have done it the moment that he became president. But he understood that he was limited by the Constitution, that he was limited by what was practical. And so the reason you see an evolution in him with using Emancipation Proclamation, for example, he was doing what he think he could in a way that made sense, right? So Lincoln, above all else, was a brilliant politician, and unlike I would say in a way that sets him apart from most people who have been president, he understood what was possible, the art of the possible, so to speak. So he understood what he could do and what he couldn't, where he could push the boundaries and where he couldn't. So it was never about what Lincoln wanted to do. It was about what he thought he was able to do. And once the war was able to be reframed by the Union as a war that had the end result of not only preserving the Union, but also would mean the extinction of slavery, then he was one of its greatest champions. So he absolutely was not forced to do it. In fact, there were plenty of people in his own party who strongly advocated against ending slavery. All right. Everybody's saying stop the count. What happened with this one? Weaver got 37%. I didn't see the rest. Oh, wow. Look at that. Weaver wins. Harrison finishes third. We've got our third party. James Weaver, the populist from Iowa, wins the election. That was fun. A little bit different. So let's talk about our new president, shall we? James Baird Weaver. He was served as a officer in the Union Army. Late in his career, he served as the mayor of Colfax, Iowa. He was born in Ohio, moved to Iowa as a boy. I want to see what his Civil War service was all about, because I don't know a lot about Weaver. So there he is, Lieutenant James Weaver. He was in the 2nd Iowa Volunteer Infantry Regiment. He was a first lieutenant at the beginning of the war. Was in Grant's army at Fort Donelson. Fought at Shiloh. Were they at the Hornet's Nest? Yeah, they were, because the Hornet's Nest was defended by several Iowa regiments. Iowa lost a ton of men defending the Hornet's Nest right there. James Beard Weaver. I like that. JD, that's good. Uh-oh. Didn't mean to do that. Did I just accidentally close that out? I think I did. So, all right. So I accidentally closed that out. So give me a second to pull it back up. Told you I'm not exactly with it today. James Beard Weaver. Yes. Lived till 1912. He was a brevet brigadier general. Was a full colonel during the Civil War. 2nd Iowa was heavily involved in those Western battles. He was at Corinth, was in the March to the Sea, fought in the Atlanta campaign. After the war, he gets into Republican politics. He was actually he was a Methodist and was part of the temperance movement, push for prohibition. So that's interesting. So this is what he would have looked like when he was president. Interesting. Very cool. All right, let's do a couple more before we wrap this up, before my my head feels like it's going to pass out here. Um, let's go ahead and move on to what are we on? 1896. Oh yeah, here we go. In many ways, kind of our first modern election. This is when the Republican Party starts to become associated more with big business and things like that. This is just before the progressive movement starts to take hold. Um, so you have William McKinley, who, again, one of my local guys. So I'm gonna be simping for McKinley in this one. But let's talk about the nomination process here. You've got another prominent politician from Maine and Thomas Reed, Speaker of the House. You've got a senator from Pennsylvania. You've got Levi Morton again, who is vice president under Harrison. You got William Allison from Illinois, Charles Manderson from Nebraska, and Shelby Cullom from Illinois. But McKinley has this brilliant campaign manager, Mark Hanna, who is getting big bankroll money from some of the robber barons, as we know them. Some of the, those really wealthy guys out there to help fund the campaign. And what they do is, remember, this is a time in history when, by and large, candidates didn't go out and campaign. But in this election, it does happen. McKinley chooses a more traditional style of campaigning. He's going to stay at home in his house in Canton, Ohio, and he's going to give speeches from the front porch like James Garfield did, the other president from Northeast Ohio. And what they do is they use all of this funding that Mark Hanna is getting from big businesses, and they pay for people to get train tickets to come and hear McKinley speak. And so tens of thousands of people are coming to hear McKinley speak from his home in Canton. So while McKinley's not traveling, a lot of people are meeting him and hearing him speak firsthand. Meanwhile, William Jennings Bryan is one of the first modern stump speech candidates. He's actually going out and traveling from town to town, giving speeches. He's very much a populist. He's a deeply religious man. He's a congressman from Nebraska's 1st District. He's later on going to be involved in one of the most famous trials in American history. Or I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Clarence Darrow. But Bryan did have a lot to say about all of that. But that's another topic for later on. Bryan is going to be the nominee for the Democrats 3 times, never able to win. And you also have a prohibition party that's running. And these guys are not really strongly regarded politicians. They're kind of minor figures. It's really a 2-man race. But it is very much a populist candidate who's all about the silver standard versus a traditional Republican who's a Civil War veteran, who runs a traditional campaign, who's from Ohio. And he supports the gold standard. Yes, the Cross of Gold speech is a really important part of all of that. McKinley is strong on tariffs. By this point, you have to understand that, we've talked a lot about tariffs. Tariffs are largely how the federal government has been funded up until this point in history. But tariffs were viewed by a lot of people as a necessary evil until America kind of came of age as a nation and could stand on its own 2 feet. And once that happened, a lot of people believed that tariffs needed to start being scaled back. And so by this point in history, American industry is really starting to take off. And even though there have been some panics and some downsizing of the economy, a lot of people think it's time to start rethinking tariffs by this point in history. So, all right, let's go ahead and get this one going here. All right, this will be an interesting one. Let's see. Any more ancient era videos? Well, I'm going to Egypt in 2 weeks. Southeast Asia is definitely high on my bucket list of places I'd like to get to at some point. Law student from Florida. Who was my favorite SCOTUS justice? My favorite is William Howard Taft. As an Ohioan, even though, I mean, Ohio isn't enough to make me like you because I can't stand Salmon Chase, and he was from Ohio. But yeah, I'd say Taft. Kieran, what's going on? We have a chance to vote for Debs and for Teddy when he runs for the third time. Yes, we do. Conklin was a serious supporter of civil rights. Absolutely. And that's why I said that earlier. I think Roscoe Conkling doesn't get enough credit for his very strong and vocal support for civil rights at his time. Okay. James Buchanan. Okay. Gotcha. When Benjamin Harrison was running for president, how relevant was his grandfather in helping his image? I don't think a lot, because his grandfather was really known more for being a general than for the fact that he had been president for 30 days. He was kind of a footnote in American history as a president. He's Indiana's president, Presidential Museum's here. Yeah, but listen, Presidential Museum doesn't mean a whole lot. Teddy Roosevelt is clearly a New York president, and his museum is going in like North Dakota. So, but yeah, I don't take anything away from Indiana being able to claim Benjamin Harrison the same way that Illinois can claim Lincoln, even though Lincoln was born in Kentucky. I think both can claim them. I think Harrison suddenly wins. Nodge, nodge. All right, let's do a couple more, and then we'll take a look at the results. Justin, thank you for that. I often do not agree with you on religion or many political topics, but I really respect your ability to speak across the aisle. Appreciate that, Justin. Glad you're here. Zism, what was worse for the economy, 37, 73, or 93? I think 73 was probably the worst of those three. Pretty severe. That really, really hurt the economy at that time. All right, let's take a look. Looks like McKinley's going to win with 55% to William Jennings Bryan's 45%. All right, on to 1900. Big surprise. It's William McKinley against William Jennings Bryan. The difference, if we go back and look, Arthur Sewell had been the nominee, and Garrett Hobart was the vice president, who died late in McKinley's term. So you've got two new running mates in this election. It's not over, Brian Bros. McKinley, don't go to Buffalo. All right. So this time you got Theodore Roosevelt from, surprise, New York. And you've got Adlai Stevenson from, surprise, Illinois. Yeah, he's actually born in Kentucky. He's like Lincoln. He's Kentucky to Illinois guy. So very regional kind of ticket for the Democrats. They don't have a lot of support in the Northeast. So here we go again. Round two. Dan the Man Legend, been a member for 50 months. Man, that's about as long as anybody, I would say. You might be the longest member on this channel. That's about as long as I've been doing memberships on the channel. Thank you so much, Dan, for all that support. Let's see. Kieran Frank, why aren't we running our choice as the next candidate like we did last time? Clay won 3 times. Did we? No, I don't think we did that. We didn't change any of the outcomes. I kept the nominees to who the nominees actually were. I don't think, I mean, unless I'm remembering this drastically wrong. I mean, Clay won 3 times because Clay ran 3 times, not because he was already the president in our timeline. They're just voting Roosevelt, really. Yeah. JD says you can always vote for Bryan in another election. Yes. All right, I think we can probably stop this one. McKinley got more votes this time. It helps that he had TR on the ticket this time around. That brings us to 1904. I know how badly you want to vote. Look at this. Does anybody remember another time that we had two New Yorkers on the two tickets running against each other? You've got Democratic nominee Alton Parker from New York. You've got Republican nominee Theodore Roosevelt from New York. Yeah, 2016, we had two New Yorkers on the ticket. You've got Senator from West Virginia, Henry Davis, as the running mate. First time a West Virginian appears. One of the few times, it might be the only time a West Virginian appears on a ticket. Charles Fairbanks runs from Indiana. So again, Theodore Roosevelt balancing the ticket with a Midwesterner. Yeah, may as well skip. Yeah, that's fair. Teddy's not going to three-peat because he didn't run in 1908. But let's go ahead and do this one. This is going to be, I feel like I'm not even really going to get into this particular election and talk about things because I feel like there's no need to do that with this particular election. All right. Watching from Canfield, Michael, just down the road from me. Very cool. Christian, do you think it was possible for the UK to be the most powerful nation in the world today? Or are they always going to get weaker? I think the reality for the UK is once they lost the empire, it's just not a reality just because the UK doesn't have the population or the resources, the access to natural resources in their own country to be the most powerful nation. I think there's just too many things working against a empireless UK for it to be in that place. Still very powerful and very influential in many ways, but I just don't think that's a possibility right now. Super interested in researching legislation passed under each administration. I mean, yeah, the best way to do that would be to go to like the website for US Congress. Congress actually has like every bill that was passed by every session of Congress. Or you can, again, looking at Wikipedia, you could look at each congressional session. So let's say, I say 20th Congress. I guess I got to be a little more specific. So I could go to the 20th United States Congress, which is from 1827 to 29. The dates of the Congress is every 2 years there's a new Congress elected. And you can look and see what the major events were, what the major legislation was, which in this case, Tariff of Abominations. I can click on that. I can read all about it. And I can advance to the next one. Okay, now I'm on the 21st Congress. Now I can read about their major events and their major legislation. Indian Removal Act, for example. So that's a really concise, easy way to dig deeper into these topics. You can see who had the majority, how many senators and congressmen there were, who the Senate president was, who the House Speaker was, all those sorts of things. It's really, really convenient way to do it. All right, I think we can probably end this particular vote, can't we? 95% for Theodore Roosevelt. Where's my TR bobblehead? I have 3 presidential bobbleheads. I have Theodore Roosevelt, Ulysses S. Grant, and James Garfield. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to the 1908 election. Guess I should have been more specific again. Look who reappears. It's none other than William Jennings Bryan. This time he's running with John Kern, who is a U.S. Senator from Indiana. Bryan had this thing where he just absolutely refused to put somebody from the powerful state of New York on the ticket with him in these elections that would have maybe helped balance out his tickets. He always put a fellow Midwesterner. Not, I just don't really understand that. William Howard Taft he was Secretary of War under Theodore Roosevelt, and was again an Ohioan. He puts James Sherman on the ticket with him, and he's from, you guessed it, New York. You just see, I mean, New York doesn't have a lot of presidents, but man, did New York play a huge role in all these elections. It's crazy. Midwest is best, so it makes sense, Emperor Tiger Star says. Hard to disagree with that. Hard to disagree as a Midwesterner. All right, so you can see again, largely Democrat for the South, Republicans for the North. And that's kind of how this is going to go. 1912. Oh, wait, we're in 1908. I'm getting ahead of myself. William Jennings Bryan, third time's a charm, right? Vote for Bryan. He's a mountain lion, someone said. Bryan's Cross of Gold speech has to be one of, yeah, I highly encourage anyone who wants to look more into William Jennings Bryan to look up his Cross of Gold speech. It's one of the most famous speeches in American history. It tells you a lot about the mindset of people in that era and the politics that were at play at that time. You can see here pretty strong votes on the Democrat or on the Republican side for the nomination process. Same with Bryan. Bryan ran away with the nomination for the Democrats. Marstar Miller, thank you. Theodore Roosevelt has entered the chat. That's right. Which war would you consider yourself an expert? Expert's kind of a subjective term, right? Because there are certain wars that I would say I probably know more than 95% of the population. But then I could point to people who know infinitely more about those wars than I do. I consider myself an expert on the American Civil War. But then if I'm in a room with the likes of someone like Gary Edelman, I feel like an amateur because that man knows so much more about the Civil War than I do. Right. So there are levels of expertise. There are experts like me, and then there are like the top 10th of a 10% of experts. Like if I were asking somebody to come on my show to talk about the Civil War, I wouldn't ask me. I'd ask someone like him. World War I would consider myself probably in the top 10% when it comes to World War I. But again, there are so many people who know infinitely more about that topic than I do. There's always someone who knows more than we do about these things. The Wars of the Roses is another one I'm very confident in my knowledge on. All right, let's take a look. 67% for Taft. All right, I think we're going to end with the 1912 election. That's a good place to stop for this one. Do I need to say a lot about this one? William Howard Taft, sitting president. Roosevelt doesn't like what Taft has done in his 4 years in office, so he runs against Taft for the nomination, but he loses. Taft still gets the Republican nomination. So Roosevelt runs as a third-party candidate, as the Progressive Party candidate, kind of nicknamed the Bull Moose Party. And this opens the door for a Democrat from the South to win for the first time since the Civil War. And we also have a socialist candidate from Indiana in Eugene Debs, who gets nearly 1 million votes in this election. So let's go ahead and pull this one up here. And I'm just doing them in order of the number of votes they received. That's what I've been doing all along. So this will be an interesting one. You just got here who won 1876. Hayes did, and he actually won by more than he did historically. Logan, thank you for being a member. Bastian, same. Thank you so much. Love the baguette. I think that's a baguette in that image. Theodore Roosevelt versus Chuck Norris. Who wins? Chuck Norris, even though Chuck Norris is 85 years old. Uh, hello in Balinese. Oh, very cool. Thank you. I am planning a China trip late 2026, early 2027. Still working on exact dates for that, but it is definitely happening and happening sooner rather than later. All right. So what's interesting about this one, I think everybody assumed that Roosevelt was going to win, but I'm going to let this one play out a little bit because we've got 666 people watching right now. Interesting. So not everyone has voted. I want to see how the second, third, and fourth all end up in this one. So far, I'm pretty content with the results. I would probably vote for Wilson over Debs. Joe Rogan. What's up, Joe Rogan? It's not the real Joe Rogan. Vote Debs so Wilson can be last. All right, you know what? I mean, I'm not opposed to that either. So Roosevelt's clearly going to win. Taft's got a clear second, but it looks like Wilson's probably going to come in third. Santa says, I would probably vote for Wilson. You know what? There's some crazy stuff that if you take someone out of context, that you could have them saying. No, Dak Marine says my state is politically poor. TR National Park, though. Hey, that's not a bad claim to have. Bonjour from France. Bastien, thank you. Yes, that is a baguette. All right, very cool. Bonjour. Theodore Roosevelt says he's fit as a bull moose. With AI, you can have him say anything. Yeah, that's right. All right, let's go ahead and end this. Looks like it's coming up with Roosevelt in first, Taft in second, Wilson third, Debs in fourth with 11%. All right, we're gonna wrap it up right there. I'm sorry, guys. I need to go to bed. I'm not feeling great, so we will come back and do this a third time, and I'm gonna try to get that squeezed in before I leave for Egypt in 2 weeks. If you're interested in going on a group trip, we've got spots available on 2 group trips. The links are in the description of this video. Check those out. Would love to spend time with you in Jordan or touring Hadrian's Wall or in Scotland. I'll be announcing more about Scotland soon. You guys all take care. God bless, and we'll see you again soon.